Hello everyone and welcome to a new year and a new season of Mountain Lake Journal here on Mountain Lake PBS. I'm Tom Halleck. Governor Andrew Cuomo has been rolling out several proposals that he will include in his State of the State address to lawmakers next week as he outlines his legislative agenda for 2020. It follows a year the governor calls historic, with Democrats passing bills tied up for years in the divided legislature, including early voting, bail reform, labor rights for farm workers, and one of the nation's most ambitious climate change laws. The governor's agenda this year calls on lawmakers to look into importing cheaper prescription drugs from Canada, expanding high-speed rail across New York, banning all flavored nicotine vaping products, and adding styrofoam containers and packing peanuts to the plastic bag ban that goes into effect in March. And once again this session, the governor will ask lawmakers to legalize the recreational use of marijuana. Mountain Lake PBS and our colleagues at New York Now will have extended coverage and analysis of the governor's 2020 State of the State beginning Wednesday afternoon, January 8th at 1:30 here on Mountain Lake PBS, and a live stream on our website at mountainlake.org. North Country Assemblyman Billy Jones joins us now. Welcome. Happy New Year to you.
It's good to be here. Happy New Year to you.
Democrats took control of Albany in a big way this past year. The majority in the state Senate helped push through a slew of progressive legislation, the climate bill, banning plastic bags, early voting, bail reform, raising the legal age to use tobacco to 21. And even though one of the governor's big priorities, fully legalizing recreational marijuana, failed, overall, that was really a historic session.
Yes, it was. And, you know me, Tom, I'm a moderate. And some of it I agreed with and some I had some hesitation with. There are certain big proposals out there that I just can't get on board with and I can't agree with. Voted no on some of it, but you take bail reform. I think you can go down the line and you can talk to any of the DAs here in the North Country and any law enforcement, and they would say, yeah, did we need some reform in the bail reform area? Of course. But these proposals, I feel, and many of us feel, just went too far. They were too extreme.
Yes. A lot of opposition here in the North Country. Is the worry that it's just going to put too much pressure on investigators, police departments to have evidence accumulated and ready to turn over in such a short amount of time, or is there real concern about releasing people?
You know, one of our jobs as public leaders here and public officials in the communities is to put public safety as a priority, to protect our constituents and our residents the best we can. And there really is a fear out there that in letting some of these dangerous criminals out of jail or not letting them have that cool-off period, that there'll be a serious public safety concern. I agree with that. But on the other side of it, you know, the discovery, you talk about that with DAs and investigators, they just simply, there's not enough personnel to keep up with a lot of these areas, and they're afraid that they're going to, miss some steps that they need to take to ensure that there is a trial and that these criminals, or these people being accused of these crimes, I should say, are being prosecuted.
Some of the other bills that passed this past year. New rights for farm workers. Is that going to be problematic for dairy farmers up here for the overtime now paying their farm hands?
I believe so. As you know, I was against this. Do I believe that farm workers should have rights? Absolutely. Do I believe that they should be treated well by their employers, in which 99% of the time they are? But some of the provisions in this just don't make sense in the agriculture community, in the farming community. You can't make the sun shine 10 days in a row, so we may have to work a little extra certain weeks or certain days. This severely limits that. The provisions put in this do not help out farmers, and especially now that our dairy farmers are struggling so much, it's been a tough ride for them.
Well, the new trade deal between Canada, Mexico, and the U.S. that has provisions for dairy farmers to sell more product in Canada, will that help farmers here in the North Country?
I think it will. I don't know if it's going to be enough to make a significant difference, but I think anytime you expand, dairy is in a global market now. Anytime we expand those markets, we can help our farmers out.
The new deal to replace NAFTA, good for the transportation manufacturers here in the North Country?
Oh, yes, yes. And we have this transportation manufacturing cluster here in the Plattsburgh region that you and I have talked about plenty and that we're very proud of. We've just had a great announcement, and I think we'll have more announcements in the future. My colleagues in New York and certain other areas want to get into the electric, making vehicles electric. We're on the cutting edge of that here right in Plattsburgh as well. That can only benefit us and benefit the economy here.
The MTA 5-year capital plan, still work going ahead on that. The Prevost deal that you just talked about, 300 buses for the MTA. Does it look good that there may be other bus deals or subway deals for Bombardier as part of the MTA 5-year plan?
I'm very optimistic on that. I'm confident that there'll be more positive announcements to come.
We talked about the governor had hoped that legalizing recreational marijuana would have passed last session. Do you see that coming up again this session? Is that likely to be back on his agenda?
I certainly think it will be coming up. I think the legislature, there's certain people in the legislature that want to discuss it again, along with the governor. I still have some apprehension about that. I think something that's been kind of missed in all this is a milestone law that we passed last year, actually, and I've stated it right here on this program. I'm for decriminalizing small amounts of marijuana. I don't believe that a small amount of marijuana on your record should follow you the rest of your life. I do believe in giving people second chances as far as that is, but we did do that. We decriminalized low amounts of
Less
marijuana.
than 2 ounces
Yep, and
possession.
expunged the records moving forward, which is a good thing. As far as full-out legalization, recreational use, whatever we want to call it today, I still have some deep concerns about that. I have a lot of partners and people that I work with in the recovery community. They're still very apprehensive about this. In the substance use and recovery community. And I have to listen to them on this.
Will there be a push, perhaps, to try to legalize recreational use of marijuana to come up with the tax revenue? The state is facing a $6 billion deficit in the coming year. Do you think there's going to be pressure to try to find new sources of revenue, and that might be tax revenue that many would want to get?
I would think, of course, that's going to be a part of the argument to do it. I've never said that maybe we should legalize marijuana for the tax revenue, for the money behind it. I thought that maybe was not a great reason to do it. There's other avenues we can look at, legalizing gambling, and there's downfalls to that as well. There's downfalls to everything. But one of those proposals alone isn't going to get rid of a $6 billion deficit. We need to really look at all sides of this, come together. It's going to be a monstrous task. It really is. It's a big deficit. We haven't been in this kind of shape in over 10 years, over a decade, I think, since the governor's first year in office, first term, I believe.
I think a $10 billion deficit back then.
So we have done it before, and we certainly will. But let's be careful that we do it in the right way.
The governor's proposing another look at high-speed rail. Right now, trains average about 50 miles per hour, Amtrak trains throughout New York State. On some sections of track between Albany and New York, they'll hit 100 miles. But do you think, realistically, we could ever get to where we have Acela-like trains that reach 150 miles per hour crisscrossing New York and even up to the Adirondacks in Montreal?
Sure. I think anytime we put enough effort into something, and anytime we get all the partners together and the stakeholders together, we can do something. People are going to say, well, we're facing a $6 billion deficit right now. Is this really the time? You know what? I think we should certainly take a look at it. It's been looked at before. I think the governor himself has looked at this before, maybe in his first term. Yeah. But it's certainly something that we should look at. When we talk about economies, and you'll hear certain people in this area, Gary Douglas always brings it up, when you can transport people from one place to another, it helps your economy.
You and Betty Little are on a task force appointed by the governor, Upstate Cellular Task Force, to look at expanding cell service and at the same time broadband across the Adirondack Park and throughout the North Country. Has that wrapped up, and have you sent recommendations back to the governor that he may actually include in his State of the State?
Sure, it has wrapped up. We certainly hope that this will make it into the State of the State. We certainly hope there's some fiduciary or monetary component in the budget. We need to have that to to get companies to invest in certain areas here. I think the bigger thing on that actually is the regulatory and the bureaucratic process that a lot of these companies have to go through in rural areas, especially in the park here. We've talked about it right here. Let's get a mechanism where we can line up all the agencies and make sure the process is as easy as possible for these companies. Because you know what? We are in a rural area, we are in a remote area. A lot of companies aren't going to want to come here and invest in that, but we need to make it easier to entice them to come. We also need some money behind it as well. That's something, a recommendation that many of my colleagues have made on this task force. We'll have to see what's in the budget. We'll have to see what recommendations come out of this or have come through to the governor that he wants to implement. And we certainly hope we get to a point where we have coverage for all the people here in the North Country. We need it.
And talking a little politics, Betty Little made the announcement this past month in December that she was not going to seek re-election, that she'll finish her term out through 2020. A lot of speculation who may run for her open seat. You decided not to jump into the race.
Sure. First, I want to say what a great partner Senator Little has been to work with here in the North Country. Last 3 years, we've worked on a lot of legislation. She's just been great to work with. And we have another year. We have another year to work on things. On that point, I'm very happy with my job right now in the Assembly. I'm proud to represent the 115th District. It was very humbling to be asked to do it by several people that I respect. But right now, at this time, I'm happy to be the Assembly representative for the 115th District.